Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the City of Santa Barbara Harbor Commission regular meeting for August 15th, 2024. It's going to be a great meeting tonight. We have a lot of important things to cover, so stay tuned. Let's do a roll call.
Commissioner Ford?
Here.
Commissioner Nelson?
Here.
Commissioner Stanwyck?
Here.
Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Commissioner McCray?
Here.
Commissioner Cohen?
Here.
Chair Stedman?
Here. Any changes to the agenda, Director Wiltshire?
No, none. Chair Stedman.
Excellent. Do we have any general public comment, Nico?
There are no speaker slips for general public comment and no hands raised at this time.
Perfect. Vice Chair?
Great. Thanks, Chair Stedman. We'll move on to the work group reports. I believe two work groups met, the strategic planning and commercial fishing, and Commissioner Ford would like to speak on the strategic planning.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. Just a little bit of a note for everyone. We have been in contact with each other, and we greatly appreciate that we received, well, actually the whole commission received the 5-year review, and that between our conversations and talking with people and our review of documents, we intend to bring to the commission a recommendation for discussion and action at the September Harbor Commission meeting. Partners, anything you'd like to add?
We're good. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
And the commercial fisheries work group also met to discuss the last action by the Harbor Commission, which was to continue the discussion and investigation of whatever opportunities could exist to increase the number of designated commercial fishing slips. There was a quick meeting with the board of directors for the commercial fishermen of Santa Barbara, and subsequently all members of the work group met with the executive director as well as the chairman of the board to go over the sort of 3 areas that were discussed. And as a result of the meeting, it was determined that the one that required more input, or a survey, if you will, from the larger fishing community, and was the one that was the portability of commercial slips. The option for a fisherman who has, in fact, a wreck slip, was there any way that we could build in some flexibility so he might enjoy or she might enjoy the benefits of the incentive associated with a commercial slip? And I know I talked to Chris, and I know I'm not going to be around, but I know that CFSB is going to discuss this at its board meeting next week. So that's the long and the short of it.
Great. Thanks for the update, Commissioner Nelson. Would any other commissioner like to speak on behalf of a work group or a subcommittee? Okay, thank you. We'll move on now to the consent calendar. Mr. Lopez, can you please read item number 1 and number 2 of the consent calendar?
Item 1, approval of the minutes. Recommendation that Harbor Commission waive further reading and approve the minutes from the regular meeting of June 20th, 2024. And item 2, proposed assignment of lease agreement number 25718, Nature's Own Gallery, located at 217-C Stearns Wharf. Recommendation that Harbor Commission review and recommend City Council approve the assignment of lease agreement number 25718 from Neil Breskin and Judy Breskin, DBA Nature's Own Gallery, Inc., to Jeffrey Heyman, DBA Zephyr Moon, LLC, for the Nature's Own Gallery located at 217 Stearns Wharf, Suite C.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Does anyone have any questions or comments regarding items number 1 or 2 of the consent calendar? Great. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Mr. Lopez, can you please do a roll call vote?
Yes, this is a motion by Commissioner Nelson, seconded by Commissioner McCray to approve the consent calendar. Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Commissioner Ford?
Aye.
Commissioner McCray?
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson?
Aye.
Commissioner Stanwyck?
Yes.
Chair Stedman?
Aye.
And that motion passes unanimously.
Great, thank you.
All right, now we'll move on to new business. Nico, can you please read item number 3?
Yes, this is item 3, appeal of denial of waiver of termination of slip permit 1A016. Recommendation that Harbor Commission consider the appeal of the Waterfront Director's denial of the appellant, Mr. Jeff Mawson's request for waiver of termination of slip permit 1A016 in the Santa Barbara Harbor and take action to either A, uphold the Waterfront Director's denial of waiver of termination of slip 1A016 and terminate the slip permit, or B, overturn the Waterfront Director's denial of waiver of termination of slip permit 1A016 and reinstate the slip permit.
Very well, thank you. Before we get started, I just want to go over some guidelines for this item. Each side will have 10 minutes to present their case, both the city and Mr. Mosen. Nico will be the timekeeper on that for us, and he'll let us know how much time is left for rebuttal for each side. And I want to remind everybody on the commission that we will need a specific motion. So bear that in mind, and we'll have to take action on a specific motion. Public comment is allowed, but make sure, commissioners, that we're not engaging the public directly, that we send our questions through staff. All right. Are there any questions from the commission? Yes, Commissioner Cohen.
We've always had a city attorney here to ask questions to in the past. I'm
I
wondering
agree.
if there is going to be a city attorney joining us.
Yeah,
No.
great question.
No, not tonight.
Is there a reason for that?
Just availability. I'm happy to get into it, and if there's something that is of question, we can, I can either relay the message, do my best, or we can postpone.
I would move to postpone.
Let's, right. There is not a second for that motion, so we'll go ahead and proceed with item number 3. However, your concern is noted. I have the same concern, Commissioner Cohen. So if we do get into a difficult exchange here, what we'll do is we'll recess and we'll regroup and we'll discuss what we want to do in terms of either re-presenting your motion or moving forward. Is that satisfactory?
Yeah, thank you. I guess I feel like there's a lot involved here, and it helps to have, we've always had questions in the past that it's been really helpful to have the attorney here, and I feel like sometimes these situations become litigious, and it helps to have someone here to guide us from the very beginning. So for those reasons, I would feel much more comfortable having a city attorney here to answer questions.
Very well, noted. Okay, are there any other concerns or questions from the commission? All right, who would like to go first, the city or Mr. Mosen?
Typically, we'll give our presentation first, and then Mr. Mawson can
Okay,
speak to our presentation. It'll be Mr. Aldridge giving the presentation, so we'll
very well.
All right, thank you, Chair Sibbon. Good evening, Harbor Commissioners and members of the public. My name is Nathan Aldridge. I'm the Harbor Operations Manager, and I will be presenting the details for this evening's termination of slip permit for 1A16. And I understand that staff will have equal time to present, so I'll keep this within our allotted 10 minutes. So tonight, the recommendation is stated is that the Harbor Commission consider the appeal of the Waterfront Director's denial of the appellant, Mr. Jeff Mawson's request for a waiver of termination for the slip permit 1A16 in Santa Barbara Harbor, and take action to either A, uphold the Director's denial of the termination, or overturn the Director's denial and reinstate the slip permit. I'll outline the timeline and the reasoning behind this termination in the next several slides. So from background on permits and terminations, as a reminder, the terms of good standing for designated commercial fishermen are set forth in our Santa Barbara Municipal Code in Section 17, as well as in our specific commercial fishing resolution 14-023. Slip permits can be terminated for failing to comply with either of these. Slip termination is the city's final method of enforcement against misuses or violations of our municipal code and rules and regulations. Staff is continuously enforcing our municipal code and rules to ensure the proper use of our harbor. And once a slip is at this stage here in termination, staff has spent dozens of hours ensuring that proper procedures have all been followed when drafting this process. And ultimately, you as a Harbor Commission play a very important role in upholding and enforcing our municipal code and have the final decision authority on any termination appeal. Section 4 in our specific resolution defines the obligations that a commercial fisherman must meet in order to demonstrate active participation in this program and to continue to receive the privilege of reduced slip fees. Commercial fishing here in Santa Barbara has long had broad support from the Waterfront Department, and this resolution was established to manage a program for designated commercial fishing slips in our harbor. So to receive the privilege of reduced slip rates, a commercial fisherman must demonstrate earnings of at least $15,000 every 2 years. And this landing requirement of $15,000 has been in place for the past over 20 years, just as a frame of reference. And according to our municipal code in section 17.20.005, failure to meet these requirements may result in termination of this permit. And if you've read through your packets, the language detailing this is on this current screen right here. Failure of person with a specifically designated permit in accordance, subsection B, the section to meet these earnings, may result in termination. So a little background of this specific slip in this case. 1A16, the slip permittee is Lance or Jeff Mawson. Mr. Mawson was assigned the slip permit in 1A16 from the lottery list in 2015 for his vessel. It's a 35-foot slip. This slip is subject to our commercial fishing policy. And for the period between April 16th, 2019 and April 15th, 2021 was the last period that Mr. Mawson provided his $15,000 in landings for this required period. And when drafting this resolution, the Harbor Commission and the Waterfront Department understood that certain extenuating circumstances could affect a fisherman's ability to meet the minimum landing requirements for this 2-year period. The resolution was intended to be as flexible as possible to ensure that active commercial fishermen stay in the program and in good standing. So specific examples of personal or family illness, loss of a vessel, natural disasters, restrictions or a closure of a fishery, all of these things could limit a fisherman's ability to meet these landing requirements. And so with that in mind, a provision allowing a temporary extension could be granted in such a case, and that extension is not to exceed 1 year. So this extension would allow a fisherman a full 3 years to satisfy the minimum requirement of $15,000 in landings. So 3 years to show 2 years of landings. It's the Waterfront's practice to ensure that all of our policies are followed with consistency. So this is how public trust is built. It's our practice to work with the slip permittees to make sure that during some of these extenuating circumstances, they ensure that they can remain in compliance and in good standing. So in this instance, after the initial landing deadline was missed, the Waterfront did not move to terminate the slip. Rather, several extensions were given in an attempt to accommodate the permittee. Our enforcement process is very permissive with many avenues to remedy this. The permittee was given several face-to-face meetings, multiple written reminder letters, and an entire additional year to fulfill the minimum requirements. I'm going to outline the steps and the timeline the next several slides here. We are here because the slip permittee exhausted every option available to meet these fishing requirements and could still not comply with the commercial fishing program. If the Harbor Commission upholds the Waterfront Director's termination, 1A16 will be a 35-foot available commercial fishing slip, ready to go to the first vessel on our commercial fishing waiting list. So for a quick walk through the timeline events, on April 15th of last year, 2023, Mr. Mawson failed to meet the deadline to show his 15,000 in landings for that previous period. Several days after, he contacted the waterfront asking for an extension due to health issues, with a doctor's note that he submitted to a requested extension, and his extension was granted until February 15th of 2024. Waterfront staff met with Mr. Mawson in January of this year. He requested and was granted an additional extension to April 15th of this year, providing him with a maximum allowed extension of a full year. The extension was granted despite Mr. Mawson failing to request this extension at least 60 days prior to the expiration of this period, which was required. Shortly after that, he submitted another packet to the department requesting an additional year's extension to his deadline, which is against our policy. He asked that receipts from transporting personnel to aquaculture sites count towards the policy. These activities were not pre-approved as required per the commercial fishing policy, nor would they have met the research requirements even if they were submitted for review. We reiterated the maximum extension was already given, and the deadline was the 15th of April 2024. We met once again with Mr. Mawson in March to discuss his request, reiterated the documents don't qualify as landings or pre-approved research. At the end of March, he showed landings totaling approximately $8,000 for this period, which was still short of his requirement to prove $15,000. Reminded him again that April 15th was the extension deadline. When the 15th came, he'd failed to show his landings for his 2 years plus additional year extension. On the 19th of the month, the Waterfront Department mailed his letter stating that deadline was missed, and giving him an additional 30 days to show valid landings from the 21st to the 24th, and was stating that the failure to provide those landings would result in slip termination process. On the 8th of May, Mr. Mawson met with Director Wilshire to discuss the process termination and the appeal process. That 30-day elapsed. He failed to meet the deadline. The Waterfront mailed him a 30-day notice of intent to terminate the permit, and the slip was put on visitor status and terminated by June 17th. So in conclusion, the permittee had 2 years to meet his 15,000 of landings. It did not, and with his additional year's extension, 3 years had still not met the minimum. Whenever an extension was permitted by our policy and was requested, staff approved it in an attempt to get this permittee into compliance. The permittee was provided ample time and warnings to come up with his 15,000 and could not. The process was explained clearly and repeatedly with termination the likely result of noncompliance. And when someone comes in for an appeal, these are always tough situations. The argument that we made is these fishermen are local, they've been part of the harbor community for many years, and they'll point to their many years of being a commercial fisherman in compliance with this policy. And it's important to remember that every fisherman who receives our reduced commercial rates is local and has been here for years, has been part of the community, and has a story. And we can't let those factors alone overturn our municipal code and our commercial fishing ordinance, because if we did, we would overturn it each time for every person who appealed. The Waterfront worked as much as we could with this permittee and as much as our municipal code and our policy allowed. So in conclusion, the staff recommendation is once again, you consider this appeal, and final recommendation is for the Harbor Commission to either overturn or deny the appeal and hold the termination for slip permit 1A16. So thank you, and I will pass it back to the chair and the commission.
Thank you very much, Manager Aldridge. Are there any questions from the commission? Commissioner Nelson.
I must admit that I was not completely aware of all the provisions of Resolution 14023, but I appreciated your noting the exception, and one of those was Section 6 of that resolution. And that basically said that with the advance permission of the waterfront director, a substitution could be made for fish tickets, for landings. And you said in your presentation that it would not have satisfied the requirement for that substitution. Why was that not the case? Why wasn't whatever Jeff submitted to you adequate to suggest a substitution of the research work as opposed to fish tickets?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Nelson. So my understanding of that provision, it's predicated on two parts. One is pre-approval of those activities before they're undertaken, which was not done. It was after the fact. And number two was that those research activities had to directly relate to mariculture, aquaculture activity. These that Mr. Mawson showed were receipts for transporting personnel to and from the site. And my reading of that and Director Wilshire's reading of that, those would not have satisfied the requirements for what research would be to support that activity, even if they were applied as per policy, even though they were not.
And secondly, a resolution is just guidance. Once before, when I asked questions about the leasing policy, I remember the city council saying to me that, because I asked for an opinion by the city attorney on that, and the answer was, no, we're not going to do that because resolutions are just guidance. So I'm operating under the impression of, for this item, that was just guidance, that the resolution was guidance. It doesn't have the force of law. It was guidance to the department and the administration of its responsibilities. And the final question is, the policy, did it say mariculture and aquaculture, that it must be mariculture and aquaculture or research?
Yeah, my understanding is that the landings could be satisfied with aquaculture and mariculture or research activities that were pre-approved. So I don't believe they had to be
So the
research activities.
pre-approval is the issue.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
And just to clear, the activity itself is the issue too. This policy really governs the commercial fishing, the catching of fish and product. We have numerous tenants, businesses, vessels throughout the harbor that do marine-related research, that perform all sorts of maritime operations that do not receive discounts. We are following this resolution, and it's very, very specific to landing of product.
I understand, but, you know, to me, kelp is pretty important to a lot of fisheries that are out there, and working on kelp restoration is critically important. So I'm sure your interpretation is accurate, but it's just, for me, I think the category of research is broader than we might be interpreting it. So you've answered my question. Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Cohen?
On the,
Is your mic on?
sorry, I think it was, I'm sorry, I should go through my notes. In February, when there were receipts that were brought that were denied, is my understanding, what was the total of those receipts? Do we know?
Yeah, from my recollection, the receipts specifically were not denied. They were valid landings, but they were short of the 15,000.
But what were, I understand, but there were some that were not acceptable, and what was the total of those? Do we know?
Offhand, I don't remember. He did submit those in a packet that was possibly part of what he also submitted as part of his appeal this evening. But the majority of those were for transporting personnel to and from the site, and I believe for repairing a trailer associated with one of the vessels.
Okay, but we don't,
The magnitude was, I believe, and Mr. Mawson can correct when he rebuts, but they were roughly in the low thousands of dollars each, so kind of sub $10,000 worth of kind of transporting costs and maintenance costs. That was the rough magnitude from what I remember. But we do have copies of those receipts.
okay. Do we have precedent for this type of action for someone who is trying to meet their obligations, who has had health issues, but now is here, is there precedent for terminating a fish slip in this situation?
Getting to the point of termination is very rare. So we are constantly kind of working with folks in certain situations. We have had numerous extensions through COVID due to health, fishing conditions, all the things that we allow. Usually those situations kind of align themselves within that year period or within that 3-year window to kind of actively fish. The $15,000 landing limit over 3 years is admittedly a really, really low bar. So yes, there's precedent in us working with commercial fishermen to get that limit. There's not a lot of precedent since I've been here over the 5 or 6 years that I've been here where it's come to this case. We usually resolve that prior to it.
So
And there
there's
has not been
no precedent for taking away a fisherman's slip when they're working to actively meet that, but have not met it by the timeline?
Yeah, I don't know. As staff, we're really just enforcing the policy that was created by Harbor Commission and everyone before us. So our part is really sort of semi-systematic and as lenient as we possibly can be within the realms of the policy.
I understand
And
that.
so the intent is not for the policy to coerce people to catch the bare minimum. It's really an intent to have people out there fishing and meeting that policy. This is by no means an attack on the type of work that Mr. Mawson is doing.
No, I'm not.
This isn't really we're
That's
not trying to
not my
determine if
question.
someone is doing good work or not. It's really, are they making landings?
I understand that. What I'm saying is that this is very punitive, taking away someone's slip, and it could be taking away someone's ability to, pay their bills. And we're at a point to replace that slip in the harbor would be, I don't know what the cost would be, but very, very expensive. And so when you're asking us to make that sort of determination, it's nice to know it's not nice to know, it's, I think, imperative for us to know, like, what is the precedent for this situation? Because if there's no precedent for taking away or for terminating a slip when someone is actively working to try to resolve the issue, then that's pretty important for us to know. So it doesn't sound like we have ever in the harbor taken away a fishing slip in your
Not in
tenure.
my tenure, but in history, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Do we know any details about that?
Not offhand. But just to reiterate, that is part of the process. So staff's part is done. We've properly administered the policy, and so now it is to the Harbor Commission. So your all's decision will set that precedent. If we, as a group, as a commission, as staff, feel that the policy is too lenient, we can go back in there and revise it. If we feel it is too strict, we can go back in there and revise it. But as this policy stands, that's what we as staff are obligated to enforce.
And I think that is a different conversation, but I think it's one that needs to happen because I think there are maybe not enough tools at your disposal, because to go from nothing to termination feels like a lot. But that's perhaps just my opinion.
It admittedly is, but it is really the way that this process would look. If there were commercial fishermen who ceased commercial fishing and did not want to relinquish their slip naturally, this is just what that process unfortunately looks like.
Thank you, I appreciate.
And just as an aside, this specific slip was terminated and was part of the commercial fishing program prior to Mr. Mawson getting the slip for different circumstances, but he did get the slip off of the waiting list due to a termination of a commercial fisherman in that slip.
Okay, one more question. I recall in the last time we had this type of hearing, if the person had put their slip up for sale, that everything would have stopped. Is that the case in this circumstance? If this slip had been put up for sale at any time during the process, would this have stopped?
If Mr. Mawson had have transferred his slip before we terminated it, yes, but as of now, his slip is terminated, waiting appeal, so he has no control over the slip currently. Based on your decision, would.
But up until the day that termination was determined, if he had put it up for sale, then that would have stopped the clock.
If he had have completed a transfer. If it was up for sale and actively in the process, that probably would have given me reason at my appeal level to say, hey, this is being handled and sorted out already, so we don't need to bring it to this level and go through this whole administrative process. So in short, yes, if the slip was transferred prior to termination, this would have all.
Thank you. I'm just trying to understand the process.
So, Waterfront, one question that's related to Commissioner Cohen's question. Would it be a duty of Mr. Mawson's to inform you that he was contemplating a transfer process?
No slip permit holder has to let us know of their plans with their slip until the day they want to transfer it and come up to our office. So they are not obligated to tell us if and when they plan to transfer their slip.
Very well, thank you. Any other questions from the commission? All right, Mr. Mawson.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Thank you very much for entertaining my appeal, obviously, for option B. I've been a long-time commercial fisherman in the harbor. Started in 1972 when Fred Benko bought Sea Landing when I was in high school, so I've been around a long time. My name is Jeff Mawson. Thank you for hearing my appeal. I'm going to go through the script and then we'll have a discussion further. First off, I'd like to assure you that my appeal regards the spirit of the letter of the Waterfront's policy on the designated commercial fishing slips. As I said, I've been a long-time commercial fisherman, hard worker. I've never been in trouble, never had any problems with the Waterfront Department, always been congenial, have never even been ticketed and never been late, okay, on my slip fees. That's both at the CUDA dock as well as with the city dock. So have an exemplary record in terms of being a member of the community and a productive commercial fisherman. So firstly, I'd like to admit that I failed to get approval for the aquaculture activities, the sustainable fisheries research. And is required in Section 9 of the city's commercial fishing slip policy. That work is documented in the attachments to the staff report, and it generated thousands of dollars of income for me. More importantly, it related to restoring kelp forests in the Santa Barbara Channel, particularly at the Channel Islands. My vision was with working with ocean rainforests to segue into the Channel Islands to restore healthy kelp beds post El Nino and warm water blob, and that would support and encourage and uphold strong commercial fisheries as well as sport fisheries. Right now, San Miguel Island has down 99% of its kelp forest canopy, still is yet to recover. Santa Rosa Island, over 90%. We're seeing some spotty kelp on the coast. It's coming back, but there are new technologies out there. Green gravel, seeded line. They're doing it in Ensenada. They're doing it in Tasmania. And I wanted to embrace those opportunities and bring those to our community in order to support sport and commercial fisheries. Concurrent with all of this, I did miss the earnings deadline of April 15th by 8 days. So I stepped up to the plate, and started fishing and diving. And so I was 8 days late with my $15,000 in landings. That's not a lot, really, I earned several $1,000s more in urchin landings and anticipate no problem meeting my obligations for the current earnings period that concludes April 15th, 2026. So I had some health problems, and those have been documented. I had prostate work, and I've got something else going on. So I've got through it. I'm healthy. I'm diving, and I'm well now. And this isn't something that I really relish, having to communicate this to you and all that in a public venue. But just in the context of my surgery, I defaulted to being on the safe side in terms of getting back in the water and diving hard. So I know you've heard that I was only transporting personnel out to the ocean rainforest site. I have pictures and there's video of me deploying and recovering hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment in the Santa Barbara Channel to measure this and test this. This is the Department of Energy behind this to the tune of millions of dollars supporting this. I felt it was an opportunity that we should, somebody in the harbor, myself, it was perfect to be able to take advantage and participate in this process because we would benefit as a community and the fisheries, the sport and commercial fisheries would benefit. So I opted to do this lighter work, so to speak, with this aquaculture, the sustainable research. It was better for me physically. I was able to handle it, and I was able to function and heal. So in the context of that, compared to diving, I brought this in to show you this is what I wear on my hips currently for 4.5 to 5 hours a day when I'm underwater. This is 30 pounds of lead here. So this is a lot to carry post-surgery in the healing process. And it's not something that, I relish saying that, yeah, it was difficult, but I'm all better now. So I just, obviously I'd like to ask of you to choose option B and cut me some slack. Like I said, I've never been in trouble. I've always been if you've had a chance to look at your staff report, I've always helped. I've participated in cleanup operations. I've contracted with the city during a previous administration in doing harbor cleanup, done oil spill cleanup, and I'm always there for the community. I've been a successful fisherman. I've raised 2 healthy boys that are successful out of this occupation, and that's all I want to do. And I want to continue on with it and just maintain and stay the course now. So again, I'd like to beseech you to cut me some, or not, I don't want to put it that way, to offer me up option B. And as I said, I've never missed a slip fee. I've never been in trouble. I'm a reasonable member of the community. I'm reasonably well respected. So that's my case, and I'm open to questions.
Commissioners? Captain?
Yeah, Mr. Mawson, I read some of your support letters, and I noted that the commercial fishermen of Santa Barbara, which includes vessel owners that fish in our local waters, both that already have slips and are waiting to be able to get a slip, and you got their support, which really means to me that you are part of that community. Do you have any other support letters, or other than the 2 other groups that are supporting you?
I believe the executive director of Ventura County Commercial Fishermen's within our bioregion is going to call in tonight, but I don't know that I have any other letters of support. I believe I have one from Commercial Fishermen of Santa Barbara and the Ventura County Commercial Fishermen's Association. And it's a small community. I don't think we need to go national, with letters of support. But should you decide to ask more of me, I would be happy to provide photos of my actually participating in the ocean rainforest deployment, recovery, and equipment, and some science behind that, as well as further letters of support.
And beyond that 1 year that you were granted, it strikes me that you potentially were actually ill during the previous 2 years that impacted your ability to harvest. And then I also note that the kelp forest is down 90%, and it has a huge impact on the value of what you target in your commercial fishery. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, our industry, the sea urchin industry in particular, as well as abalone, which is closed, and other nearshore fisheries are highly dependent on a healthy nearshore ecosystem. And the kelp that grows within that ecosystem provides habitat and food for other fish, as well as pinnipeds, and slows down coastal erosion. So there are many facets to this new technology of kelp restoration, as well as biofuels and biochars, and using it as food supplements. So I think it's a technology that's knocking on our door on a global scale, the restoration of that, and the federal government is behind it with the Department of Energy and many universities are looking into this, as well as trying to measure the effects of carbon sequestration that kelp absorbs from the atmosphere. So it's can be on a macro level to us just supporting these nearshore ecosystems and having healthy kelp to support fisheries, to 100-hectare parcels 200 miles out where the kelp is harvested and turned into a slurry and processed, and blended with fuels and then buried in the ground. And the technology is fabulous. It's really moving forward right now. And here we are in our community with a lot of money and a lot of, the world is watching us right now. But unfortunately, we're a little bit behind Tasmania. So I felt it would be beneficial to our community to, and as well as the fisheries, to step up to the plate to encourage and collaborate, that there would be a positive externality of that for our community and our fisheries and our ability of our local fishing community to provide food, to us, so to the community. Your other question? I'm sorry.
I was just wondering, it strikes me that your health challenges actually kept you from fishing much more than just the 1 year, that they were actually part of why you didn't have higher landings in those previous 2 years.
Yeah, it was, there was the health as it deteriorated until surgery was performed, and then there was the recovery, and then COVID kicked in at that time. Everybody was freaked out. My wife was wiping off everything that came from the supermarket that came in the house, and so and then the urchin industry shut down for a period of time, some months. Processors stopped buying. So that's in the mix, and I'm not nitpicking or, throwing it all. I'm just saying, hey, I'm a local guy. I've worked really hard, and I'm back, and I have been fishing, and I was only 8 days late with meeting my landing requirement. And so it's not like, I haven't paid my slip fees and I'm off somewhere else, I'm happy to, my intent is to be a full fisherman, but obviously with other possibilities of aquaculture coming on, and I'd like to ensure the commission that I will get pre-permission from staff and from you as these things evolve. USC, UCSD, and UC Irvine, there's a lot of stuff in the pipeline right now to develop this, and I'd like Santa Barbara to be a part of it. We have the benefit of the Channel Islands offshore. We have a strong sea urchin dive fleet that can participate in these aquaculture opportunities, and as well as developing them. Some years ago, I was harvesting mussels off the platforms, trying to develop Houchin and Hogan into aquaculture areas that we could grow scallops and mussels and perhaps some abalone on during the decommissioning process. I mean, we have a wealth of opportunity out here, as well as the ability of fish utilize the platforms for reproduction. So I see those as opportunity for our community. The pipelines are already there. There's already power lines going out to them. I'm exploring that as well. I'd like to see perhaps maybe we should use them for new technologies for solar power and offshore wave energy. So there's a lot of stuff going on. I used my health problems as an opportunity to divert some of the energy towards that. No, I'm not on top of the heap, but I've at least embraced all these universities and the best available scientists who want to collaborate with us to help us to grow. And that's where I'm coming from. And I apologize, and yeah, it's health. As you get older, you have health issues, but I can handle it now. I'm well. So with that, I'd just like to request that you choose option B and give me a chance, please. I won't let you down.
Are there any other questions from the commission? Commissioner Anderson?
A few questions. I think just one is for you. How long do you think it would take to get the necessary receipts at your current activity level?
For the next 2 years, While I was only 8 days late in acquiring the necessary receipts to satisfy the current $15,000. So I'm current right now, although the staff terminated my slip. And so I'm on a visitor status in my slip, but I stay in my slip because I charge things and I have equipment, in the dock box that I use to facilitate my sea urchin operation, as well as extra lines for ocean rainforest, and working with them in a skiff that I have. For the next 2 years, it would probably be a month or two. So, the boat's in the slip right now. I have been active. I do have, if you look at your packet, I have my logbook from this last month and this month. Been working every week now, and I'm back. And, I'm taking it very seriously and being as productive as possible.
Thank you. Can I ask staff questions now, too? Is that appropriate?
Yep,
Is that my
absolutely.
shot? Okay. What is the process? Will he stay in the visitor slip as long as he wants, or what would be the process if we voted for option A to fill the slip? Who would get it, I guess?
We do have a commercial fishing wait list, so it would go to that. The specific slip would. It's in our commercial fishing area. We do have visitor slips available that we make available to visiting fishermen anytime. So not that specific slip, but Mr. Mawson could stay in any other visitor slip at commercial fishing visitor rates.
Okay.
If nobody from the commercial fishing wait list took the slip, then it would go to a commercial fishing lottery. And so that's kind of anyone with a commercial, who can meet the requirements of the commercial fishing policy, can essentially put their hat in and go for that slip.
Okay. If he followed the order correctly and asked for his research to be approved to count towards the 15K tickets, would you guys have approved it?
To reiterate, I mean, this is really tough, right? I understand the work is excellent, but we're not providing discounts as like a grant. We're not taking in applications for who is doing the most noble work. It's very specific, the policy. And so what we received is in your packets. It was really just 6 or 8 checks that were cashed to Jeff Mawson. And so we have had issues with people fabricating fish landings in the past, and so that's where all of this policy came from. It's very, very tied to physical landings, provable through Fish and Game. So as it stands, the answer would be no, because it's just a photocopy of a number of checks that were paid to Mr. Mawson. So we really have no idea the work that he's doing. Would love to get there, that's fine, but there would need to be a little bit more, or our process would need to be a little bit more robust, and that's not necessarily how it's set up now. We don't have a process set up where anybody doing maritime activity can approach us and essentially submit for slip discounts. It's just not the policy that exists at the moment.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just a clarification.
Commissioner Ford?
So to clarify, to me, it seems like there's a possibility our policy is a little bit outdated or isn't robust enough for the things that are happening in our ocean right now. So are you saying that the Harbor Commission at some point could also revise this policy?
Yeah, Commissioner Ford, and I think we are kind of, with the commercial fishing work group, we've kind of started delving into looking at and revising that policy. I wouldn't say it's outdated, it's worked. These sort of terminations happen very rarely. It has worked for the commercial fishermen who use it and abide by it. So from our opinion, it has been working. It allows us to kind of stay at arm's length, commercial fishermen to do their business. The bar is very low, and so it is very rare to get to this point. Are there entities that want commercial fishing slips? Probably. Could we create a policy to make that happen more smoothly? Probably, and I think it's worth looking at the policy. So in short, yes, we can definitely review and revise the commercial fishing policy.
Yep, I didn't mean to imply that it wasn't working, that just perhaps there are some broader, I don't know, topics to include.
Commissioner Nelson?
I heard you say that it was the process is set up essentially, I think what it's saying, to handle fish tickets, to document the $15,000 worth of landings, and that the process is not designed to deal with aquaculture, even though in the municipal code that I know, it talks about aquaculture as well as commercial fishing. Is that something we should look into? If in fact the process and the guidelines you have currently can't deal with aquaculture, $15,000 in aquaculture, is that something we need to look at as opposed to saying if you don't have fish tickets, you're in trouble?
Commissioner Nelson, that is in the current policy. And so you can, but it is still tied to landings and an aquaculture commercial license. And so there are checks and balances to determine. It can't just kind of be general exposure to aquaculture. So the existing policy does very much call out aquaculture specifically.
Okay, okay.
Vice Chair?
Yes, thanks. I just have a question regarding the landings right now and the fact, is he in good order or not? And I'm just looking at the dates on this. March 29th, $8,000, but then there's, it looks like urchin from April 10th through April 23rd for another 8,500. Is he essentially over the 15,000 now, or were those not included in this? Or is that the discrepancy receipts where they were due to transportation?
No, since Mr. Mawson's slip was terminated, he did go out and fish additional urchin and provided fish tickets for those, or tickets for those landings. So that was after the fact, kind of after the termination.
Got it, okay. So currently, if you included those, he would essentially be over the 15,000 now?
If those landings had have come in within that 3-year period,
Right.
we wouldn't be here.
Got it.
Actually, I was fishing before the termination. That's incorrect. And I met it before the termination. It's just that I was over the time limit, which was why I was terminated.
Thank you.
And just as a point to clarify as well, the 2-year landing for this cycle was from 2021 to 2023. He was given the provision of an extension of 1 year. So when I just want to clarify when Mr. Mawson spoke about 2024 to 2026, that is incorrect. So if he would be in good standing as of this last cycle, he would have until 2025, April 15th of next year. He would not get an additional year of that 2 years, if that makes sense. So that the cycle of 2 years goes from 21 to 23, and then in this case, 23 to 25, irregardless of whether he would get, or any individual would get an additional extension of a year. So if he had remained in compliance and had met that threshold before the due date, he would still have to come up with another 15,000 before 2025, if that makes sense.
Thanks.
Commissioner Cohen?
So I have a question for staff. So just so we're clear then, so that is accurate, what Mr. Mawson's saying, that he was 8 days late in providing, in preventing this process from starting. Is that correct?
To a point. So we followed our code to the dates and had met with Mr. Mawson a number of times. And then, as he mentioned, after the deadline, the 3-year deadline to meet those landings, he had not yet provided those landings. He went out and fished after that fact and had landings.
But at this point, those have been submitted and those are not contested. Like I realize there were tickets that were, or there were, receipts that were contested. These are not contested by staff.
No, I mean, not to get into like the administrative semantics, but as of after that 3-year period, his slip was terminated. And so there isn't really no obligation for him to turn in those receipts for the commercial fishing policy. He can turn in those receipts now as a visiting fisherman to get discounted visitor rates. And so if his slip were reinstated, we would then go kind of recalibrate, unpack all this, get back to where we were on the last day, and then start up from there again.
Sure. But since he's asking, we're basically being asked for, an appeal. So there's an acknowledgement that someone's, done something that is outside of what what's standard, and I'm just wanted to confirm that as of this point, those were approved, or not approved, but they are approvable had they been turned in on time. Is that
Yeah, they're
correct?
like legitimate commercial fishing landings.
Okay. And then my question for you, Mr. Mawson, is, you know, what would be the cost to you to get back to where you were on April 15th should this termination take place? Because I think that that's something that we need to understand is, you know, how punitive is this to replace a slip within the harbor and to get back to normal? Because it seems like this is what you do. This is your livelihood. So it's important for me as a commissioner to understand that.
Well, if I were to be terminated permanently and left I'm on a visitor status, as correctly noted in my slip. But as long as I continue to pay for that, I have equipment to continue to work with Ocean Rainforest. I have charging equipment in my dock box that I charge scooter batteries for scouting and for transporting myself underwater with. It's called a diver propulsion vehicle. So when I get in at night, typically I have, chargers going, on the boat to refresh these batteries. So it would be, they're 40 pounds each. So lugging those up the dock and taking those, every day or 3 days a week, that would be really hard. And it's the convenience of the slip, and I really appreciate it. And it would stymie and thwart my operation, to some degree. So I appreciate the use of it and would like to continue that, which is why I'm here. I didn't opt to sell my slip. I'm here out of good faith. I'm not gaming anything or any system. I just want to be whole. I want to be a whole fisherman. That's my job. And you guys within your power and your realm to help me continue to do that.
I appreciate that you're not gaming the system because we certainly know that sometimes that happens.
All my information is, I'm happy to submit it for copies. I'm happy to show the checks and the landings and legitimize it. I mean, I've been upfront with my health issues, in a public venue. I'm happy to be completely transparent in order to be successful in this, to keep my slip.
Do you know what the value of the slip is?
Approximately, I know what the other ones have sold for, and I didn't want to sell mine. I'm here now. I've foregone the opportunity to sell my slip to bring this to you because this is the right thing to do, is to keep working. And so it's not important to me what it's worth. It's part of my fishing operation, and that's really important.
Fair enough. I'm just trying to quantify if something did happen, what the cost would be for you to replace the slip and get back to where you
I think
were.
slips are 125 or something like that. Yeah, I'm not really sure. So, but I don't have that disposable income to do that. So I'd opt for something.
So you wouldn't be able to replace it
No, I
if
wouldn't.
you lost it?
No.
That's what I'm asking. Thank you.
Any other questions? So, yes.
One more question, sorry. And I assume $125,000 would be an extremely large part of your business assets.
It would be. I'd have to take out a loan to do it, probably. I don't know. Hopefully, in 3 to 7 years, when aquaculture is really taking off, might not be a problem. But I want to bring it to the harbor and provide jobs to the community with this, with the possibilities that are out there right now of restoration work as well as aquaculture related to the oil platforms. Then we have a 7 to 10 year window until they remove them, if they do.
Thank you.
For the gentleman in the back, you'll have an opportunity for public comment. Not yet, though, but noted your hand. Manager Aldridge, so the fish tickets that were submitted after April 15th, those are for the period 21 through 23, correct?
That's correct. If they're, number one, they're valid landings, and if they were executed during that time frame, they would count for that period of, March 15th, 21 to April 15th, 23.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? You still have some time on the clock, Mr. Mawson, if you wanted to rebut anything specifically that the waterfront presented.
The only comment that I'd like to underline is that my function with ocean rainforest was not just transporting personnel. There's video and still photos of deploying and recovering equipment. And off of my vessel with me participating in that, I spent many hours at UCSB putting the stuff together with teams, different teams from Kelson Marine based out of Massachusetts, with UC Irvine, San Diego State University. So it's been strong collaborative work to make that happen out there. It's still out there right now collecting data, and it may evolve, it may grow, and we'll just have to wait and see. But the possibility of growing kelp, they have warm water tolerant strains, they have sterile strains, and it can be planted through various means right now, and it can restore around the Channel Islands. It can thwart or slow down coastal erosion, wave action. When I was growing up, the kelp in high school in the 70s, the kelp went out half a mile in front of Hope Ranch. And there's just a few little spotty areas now. So think in terms of strong kelp restoration and how it would slow down coastal erosion and the sand drift, and we'd have more beach sand accrual. It'd be better for tourism. Might not be so good for flies on the beach, for sure, but I think it would be a good thing, to do everything we can within our power and the new technology to restore and maintain these ecosystems that are being imperiled by climate change. So I spent my life in the ocean, on the ocean, underwater. One of my sons is involved, in ocean work. And I'd like to see it perpetuate and thrive if possible, and do whatever I can within my means. Still got 2 minutes left.
Very well. And just one last opportunity for questions. Okay.
I'm good, thank you. Yeah.
All right.
Again, just to underline.
We don't want to rush you.
Option B, I would really, really appreciate it if you guys could support me in this, and I won't let you down, and I'll just continue and stay the course, and I'm happy to share any information, and new technology as it comes along, and bring it to you guys, and watch this thing grow and support local commercial fisheries and sport fisheries in the process. And the nearshore stuff is kelp dependent because kelp only grows to 80 to 100 feet. So it's important for our community to have local supplied seafood, and that's what it does. There's 800 species of organisms that live in a kelp bed, and there are areas out on the Channel Islands that are. I have one video on my YouTube channel. I call it functionally extinct. It's a dead zone, So. It's heartbreaking, and that's what I'm all about, is restoring our ecosystems, as a strategy. And kelp is first and foremost in that. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Any points that you want to rebut, Waterfront? Okay. Public comment, Nico?
Yes, we have one hand raised and one speaker slip that was submitted. So we can take the online speaker first.
Sure.
Okay. Dave Kolker, you are unmuted and can go ahead.
Yeah, do you guys hear? I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm actually calling from both, so I'll try to make this as brief as possible. Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. My name is Dave Coker. I'm the Executive Director of the Ventura County Commercial Fishermen's Association, or VCCFA. Our organization represents 70 members, of which we have active fishermen opt out of and land their catch in Santa Barbara Harbor. Today, I'm going to speak on behalf of our members and personally to address the pressing issue, the denial here of the options we have here to reinstate Jeff Mawson's commercial fishing slip. Our concerns comply with the strict enforcement of permit renewal due to the clerical oversights, the 8 days late, and the lack of attention to the spirit of the policy as well as the letter of the policy. As well, also, like I said, is 8 days late meeting the landing requirements. Jeff's undoubtedly active commercial fisherman, as attested to through the letters of the CFSB that were submitted by Harry LeCornick and then myself and our organization. I think the question if he is an active commercial fisherman is unequivocally yes, and he's part of our community. His contributions extend beyond daily fishing operations. He's deeply involved with the scientific research, as you're finding out, fishery resiliency programs, and an emerging aquaculture industry that's designed to help sustain the fishes, especially sea urchins. On a personal, Jeff's been my mentor for nearly 2 decades. I started out of Santa Barbara Harbor actually as a home backhand in the urchin industry. I've moved to now being the executive director of our successful United Commercial Fishing Association. His unwavering support and expertise has been pivotal, not just for the commercial fishermen association, but commercial fishermen as a whole. With consideration given to Jeff's significant contributions to our industry community, as well as the fact he was only days late meeting his landing requirements,
You've expired the 2 minutes, so if you can just wrap up, please. Okay, very well. Any other hands raised? Nika?
No other hands raised, but we have one in-person speaker slip, Harry LeCornick.
You can fill out another speaker slip.
Oh. Yeah, good evening, Commissioners. My name's Harry LeCornick. I'm lifelong commercial fisherman. Grew up in the harbor. Parents were avid boaters. Father sat on this commission in the 70s. I'd like to also thank the staff. We have an unreal harbor to fish out of. It's a good harbor. Probably one of the most accommodating harbors up and down the coast. As you heard earlier, Jeff has been very involved just outside the fishing. Last year we lost Mike McCorkle. Jeff really helped spearhead helping get his containers cleared out in the yard. And he's been active, all the other stuff you heard too. The boat's been working. I've gone by him several days when he's out on the ab farm with guys. And so it's, to me as a fisherman, sometimes it's not always just making money, but the time out working, not out surfing. So he's been working. And I think the policy could be cleaned up. I think somebody should be able to run all the way through this aspect before you actually get terminated. I know there's a lot of little areas we could work at it. It's good policy. It's lenient, but at times too, it needs some flexibility. So I'd ask you to support Jeff in his appeal. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And one more speaker slip, Ian Kellett.
Hello, everyone.
The floor is yours.
All right, finally. Okay, good to be here. Thank you guys all for your work and your service to the community and to the harbor. It's a wonderful community. My name's Ian. I'm a professor at UCSB. I teach the Coastal Media Project, and I work with the Bren School around documentary. My commitment is around habitat regeneration and making sure that we have a thriving ecosystem out here in the Santa Barbara Channel. So, about 3 or 4 months ago, a global scientist named Brian von Herzen cued me in on Jeff Masson as someone who has eyes in the water, who is seeing what's happening in our habitat, right? He spends up to 20,000 hours underwater in the last 10 years. He's a very important resource. And so he cued me in and introduced me on a call to say, hey, go talk to this guy because he has things to say about what's happening in our ecosystem. We have become friends, and I've been going visiting with him. He's been doing interviews with my students who are making films on coastal issues that films will be airing on the 23rd. I'll send invitations out later. But most importantly, he is contributing to something that's very important that's coming our way. And this sort of illness and the things that he were doing, it put him on the map as someone who's speaking knowledgeable about how we're going to regenerate our habitat around here. He's got a lot of good ideas, as you heard, but most importantly, he's actually like in touch with the habitat and representing commercial fisheries, and has ideas on how we may bring commercial fisheries and habitat regeneration technologies together. And so that partly what I'm excited about is that you're all excited about that too. And it's not just about extraction, it's also about stewardship of our ecosystem. And this is something that is kind of rare to see in a commercial fisherman, someone who's thinking about both things, a care for the kelp and the ecosystem, as well as the economy and commercial fisheries. So I think he's a real value. He's definitely a value to us as a storyteller. He's already been contributing his voice. I think that, I don't know all I can say. It's about all I got to say about that, but he's a real value to the habitat and to the ecosystem, and we hope that we can keep him here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers, Nico?
No other speakers, Chair Stedman.
Captain?
Yeah, let me turn my mic on. I will be supporting B, Mr. Mawson's appeal. I don't want to detract from the job that staff did. They were given direction, and they followed it dutifully right to this point. But this process also allows us here that last opportunity to take a good look at the whole picture globally and make a decision that's the right decision. And I believe that is the right decision. I've known Jeff since the Marine Life Protection Act initiative stuff in about 2010, and he's always been an active participant, not only in the fishery, but also in fisheries policy. He's always been on the cutting edge. He's always looking for that new efficiency in the commercial fisheries. He didn't really mention it, but when kelp is low, the value of the very thing he's the best at getting, drops considerably by the pound. So it made it probably more difficult for him to be able to make those landings, aside from just just his health challenges. I believe that those health challenges didn't just occur over that year, but also impacted his ability to really work in the water before that year. I would encourage my fellow commissioners to support Jeff.
Commissioner Nelson?
To buttress what Mary is saying, I too believe that staff was doing their due diligence and enforcing the guidelines and the resolutions that are in front of them. But I really don't think they were flexible enough to deal with Jeff's situation. And I think it's wrong for us to basically put him out of business because there's not that flexibility doesn't exist when it comes to research projects. And the testimony and the letters from two fishing organizations, it's basically regional support, is to be acknowledged. And this commission, when we were confronted with another termination, it was an individual who had gotten caught in whether a boat was operable or not. And we said these were extenuating circumstances, and we gave that individual a chance to make it right, and it's my understanding that, in fact, he did. So I, too, am going to vote for B, I guess, on this, and I would hope that the rest of the commission would join us.
Are there other comments? Vice Chair?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I understand that what the Waterfront is doing, where they're following the Muni Code, which I think they're in the right to do that. It's a real shame that it was 8 days late. It's just that ended up just being a really big waste of resources, time and energy on everybody's part. But I understand that, a combination of medical issue, combination of miscommunication with pre-approval. But I think most important is that there has been ongoing fishing since this. So for me, it checks the box as a fishing boat and a fishing slip. And I think that we're kind of at the task to really just do what's best for the community here. So, thanks.
Any other comments here? Good, we don't have to recess. So, is there a motion on this item?
I will move that we forward option B, overturn the waterfront director's denial of waiver of termination of slip permit 1A016 and reinstate the slip permit.
I second that motion.
Nico, can you please read back the motion?
Yes, this is a motion by Commissioner McCray, seconded by Commissioner Nelson to move forward option B to overturn the waterfront director's denial of waiver of termination of slip permit 1A016 and reinstate the slip permit. Commissioner Ford?
Aye.
Commissioner McCray?
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson?
Aye.
Commissioner Stanwyck?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Chair Stedman?
Aye.
And that motion passes unanimously.
All right, very well. Thank you, everyone.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, yes, Commissioner Cohen.
Thanks. I just want to also acknowledge the staff and their work on this. And also, I feel like there is an opportunity, because I've been through 2 of these now, for staff and the commission to look at this process and not have it be, maybe confusing, I don't know, when you've done the work and you've done what you need to do, and then, obviously, we're in a situation where we're giving a reprieve at this time. But I do feel like there's an opportunity for us to improve and to give you maybe other tools in your arsenal besides just termination, which is my understanding is the only tool that you really have.
Vice Chair?
Yeah, I'd also like to make a comment as well on just the issue that we just discussed. If we look in the minutes that we approved earlier, one of the motions that we had on agenda item number 3 of last meeting was regarding landing requirements, which we sent back to the commercial fishing work group. So I think this is something that's, I just want to suggest that the work group take a look at, because I think there's other things besides fish that we've kind of discussed today that could possibly be updated in the landing requirements. So just wanted to make that.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the Waterfront Department for your work. I know it's considerable staff time to prepare for an appeal, so thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? All right. We'll move on to department update, item number 4.
All right, well, thanks everyone for the thorough discussion on all of that. I'm Mike Wilshire, Waterfront Director. I'll take this next item, just have a couple things to update the commission on. So, next slide. One of 2 items, so I just wanted to provide an update on the recent proposal by Santa Barbara South Coast Chamber of Commerce to the city on kind of partnering with the city on economic development. Next slide. So the Chamber of Commerce has been working with the various departments and the city for the past few months. That includes the Waterfront Department. So more recently, they presented a proposal to the Finance Committee on July 23rd. The proposal was for an economic development plan in partnership with the Chamber and the city. Their initial request was $250,000 in city funds, of which $50,000 would be Waterfront Department and $50,000 would be from the airport. So these funds would really be for the chamber to begin work on partnering with the city on an economic development plan. I put a few of the bullet points that were in their proposal that were waterfront specific. They were really meeting with waterfront stakeholders, researching brand and refreshing the waterfront, meeting with and working with CFSB on commercial fishing needs, and then creating a workforce pipeline to help support training for blue economy related jobs. Next slide. Waterfront staff attended the Finance Committee, as did Commissioner Steadman and Nelson, so they were present. So the Finance Committee was fairly critical of the Chamber's proposal. There's a lot of comment, a lot of discussion. Some of the main concerns that were heard that came from the Finance Committee was that the proposal was not competitively sourced. There was no RFP, no bid. It was just a direct proposal from the Chamber of Commerce. They were concerned that it was a little too basic and lacks detail. There was some discussion that city staff has access to a lot of this data and could maybe do a fair amount of that work in-house. They were concerned about the deliverables and just kind of what that would look like. It might just be like a repackaging of data that we all already have. And so there was really kind of this utility question. If the city's going to go spend $250,000, well, what's going to come of that? Is it going to be a report with a whole bunch of information we already have, or is it going to be something that's useful? So they were really kind of demanding that it would be more clear on how this would specifically help not only the waterfront but the city. At the end of all that, ultimately the Finance Committee approved the proposal and voted to send the entire package or proposal to City Council in a future date. Next slide. This is my last slide on this one. So kind of next steps with where it goes from here. So city staff still working internally and continuing to work with the chamber to see if there's any room to refine it or kind of flesh out those deliverables and make them a little more specific, really nail down what data is going to be available and how it's going to be used. Staff's working right now internally to kind of use GIS to establish some of these business districts to see if we can pull sales data. We're a little bit unique in the waterfront department. We're an enterprise fund. We have access to a lot of our sales data, and a lot of the other city districts, they don't. That comes in the form of tax data to our finance department. So ultimately, the chamber will take this item back to full council at some point. A date is not set that I know of right now. Ultimately, I'd say the waterfront is supportive of spending some dollars on economic development. We don't typically do this sort of thing. If it's the chamber or some other entity, I think there's value in us as an enterprise, as a business entity, feeding back into that. We're in a kind of a unique spot in our business cycle with a lot of our tenants that we could benefit from that. So if nothing else, this sort of piqued our interest as the waterfront department to start looking into what is the best option. I'm not saying this is exactly it, but they do represent a potential good partner if we can kind of iron out some of those details. Next item. Any questions on the economic development plan before I go to my next item? May as well take them now.
I don't have a question, but I know you said you don't normally do that sort of thing and get involved in economic development work. Well, I'm one commissioner who thinks that's a great idea and that you should. The City Council and the Waterfront Department have supported the recommendation of the Commercial Fisheries Subcommittee and now Work Group regarding the dire need for infrastructure. And as a result of that, we wound up talking with Santa Barbara City College, who may provide us with adequate ground for an infrastructure project, but they're really interested in the blue economy and how they might be able to create the pipeline. And the fact that you mentioned those 2 points about the commercial fishermen of Santa Barbara and the workforce development piece, that's a direct result of a presentation that Chris Voss and Kim Selko made to the Public Policy Committee of the Chamber. So they are definitely on board with the previous approvals of the Harbor Commission for infrastructure and promotion of the seafood industry. So I'm delighted that you were responsive to the Chamber of Commerce, so I thank you for that.
Commissioner Cohen?
Oh, my question just was, assuming that this item does, that this proposal does come to fruition, are we talking about it in Harbor Commission because some of that funding would come from our enterprise fund? Is that?
Yeah,
my
exactly.
understanding?
As the chamber laid out their proposal, they made a request to the Waterfront Department for $50,000 and the airport for $50,000, and then the general fund for the rest of that 250. So,
Okay,
but yeah, there was an ask to the Waterfront Department.
all right. Thank you.
And all I would say, Director Wiltshire, I mean, my bias on all this is the last time I checked membership of the chamber and their executives and their board, I didn't see any CPAs or economists. So I would like to see that level. I mean, if we're spending money, there should be an audit process and a much better plan than what was offered to us.
And my statement was to support looking at the waterfront from the standpoint of economic development. It wasn't that we shouldn't have tight metrics and measurement on how our money is spent, but it's just the general direction I thought was right.
I agree with the general direction. Commissioner Ford?
Thanks. So just to clarify, I would expect then that the 4 bulleted items are going to be flushed out in much more details and eventually shared with us. Since
Commissioner
those are the ones that pertain to the waterfront.
Yeah, potentially. So the full proposal includes 8 or so sections. With
Right.
So we're one really small part of it. It really lies in the hands of council and the chamber now. And so if full council hears this and says, hey, that's a great idea, let's go forth with it, I think that will spur us to say, all right, we really need to know what we're getting for this. In advance of that, staff is working with the chamber to kind of fine tune those points. And so I myself, the waterfront, are saying, hey, these 4 points are a little vague. Let's focus on what really that means. You know, if we're going to say meet with CFSB, let's get 5 meetings on the book or something that is a little more concrete so that we can kind of know what we're getting for our dollars.
I appreciate that. That was the second part of my question, was how much time and effort and involvement will staff have? And is apparently
yeah.
already having.
Yeah, no, I'd say a fair amount to hopefully get a better end product, the more we can be involved. All right, move on to my next one. Chair, you good to? I've got the two piece in this item.
Yeah, absolutely. The Planning Commission 5-year review.
So my last item is a review of our visit to Planning Commission in July, where we took our 5-year review of leases or uses. So this isn't new to you. So back in March, we took this same presentation to Harbor Commission. You all weighed in. So we're required by municipal code to do a 5-year review of our uses and bring that to Harbor Commission and Planning Commission. So that just this recently in July, we brought this to the Planning Commission. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we brought this to you all on March 21st. So you all discussed and had really great input and comments. So some of the main Harbor Commission comments were, and I just went back and rewatched this today actually. So some of the main comments from Harbor Commission were looking into the utilization of Stearns Wharf for more commercial applications, so vessel tie-ups, offloading. Continue looking into demand and availability for more commercial fishing slips. And one of the big takeaways was to review upcoming leases and expiring leases annually, which we're going to implement. So that kind of gives us more eyes on what's coming down the pipeline as far as our expiring leases. And then there was some discussion on looking into the expansion and availability of housing within the harbor. So more recently, this item was presented to the Planning Commission on July 18th. So they had a really robust discussion as well. Number of comments, a lot of input, some similar to Harbor Commission, some new. So to summarize some of the main points of Planning Commission, so kind of this vein of like looking for more opportunity or innovation or expansion. So kind of got the general sense that they were looking for change or increased development in some way. Continued support of commercial fishing, so looking into additional slips, really supportive of commercial fishing industry. And then there was some discussion about evaluating the direct benefits to the waterfront and city from the commercial fishing industry, so how to maximize those benefits. A lot of discussion about sea level rise and what is the waterfront doing. Some fairly critical comments about the yacht club. So are they paying market rent, use of coastal space, their parking lot, best use, that kind of discussion at the Planning Commission level. And then expansion and protection of outrigger canoe permits. And then again, a lot of discussion about housing in the waterfront. So not only interest in the liveaboard program, but also kind of discussing additional permanent housing in the waterfront as well at the Planning Commission level. So that was one of their main lines of discussion. So next slide. So next steps on our end. So this is a really valuable process for us, for staff, for Harbor Commission, everyone involved. So some of the things that we're going to take away from this. So we're kind of beginning the review process of our commercial fishing policy. So a lot has kind of been happening over the last few months, including what we just dealt with. So I think this will be the policy that can kind of shift or improve how we support the commercial fishing industry. We'll be reviewing our upcoming leases annually. So this is not something we've done historically, but there is clearly a need to, or a desire to do that now. And so this will allow more time and kind of a better look ahead for future uses of lease space. We'll plan to evaluate our liveaboard policy. So at a meeting in the near future, we'll bring our liveaboard policy to the Harbor Commission, just kind of explain it in its entirety. And that's usually a good launching point to discuss if there's need or room for improvement. We're obviously embarking on a huge effort with sea level rise, and so I think that one's kind of handling itself. We have all those grant funds, and we're working with Sustainability and Resilience, Public Works, ourselves. So that's kind of kicking off right now. We actually have a couple internal meetings starting in the next couple weeks. This process will really take 1 to 2 years, but this is kind of our guide on how we will take action on sea level rise and plan for it. And really, for the next 5-year review of uses, we'll really include more highlights. It has been sort of this dry review of leases. There seemed to be sort of some demand for like, hey, spice it up a bit. Tell us all the good things that you're doing instead of just the same old show. So it is incremental, but there have been a lot of changes, and there has been a lot of good, even within our tenants. And so we've got some really successful changes. We got Santa Barbara Landing on the cusp of doing something new. We've got Dark Coffee, Moby Dick's recently renovated, Harbor's working on their renovation. So there's a lot to talk and point to in that realm. We just don't necessarily do it in this report. And that's it on that Planning Commission item. So back to the Harbor Commission, if you guys have any questions on that in particular.
Excellent. Are there any hands raised?
There are no hands raised.
Okay, sorry, Captain?
I just want to comment. The Planning Commission seems pretty intent on some kind of exploration of housing down in the harbor, but I think that as a commission, we really need to make sure that our ocean-dependent uses are taken care of before we start looking at other uses of the waterfront that might be accommodated equally elsewhere.
Admiral Nelson? Commissioner?
All I know when I look at these next steps, it almost kind of fits very nicely in a strategic planning process. I mean, many of these things are future new directions, way to look at how we handle access to slips. So I'm actually impressed with the recommendations of the Planning Commission.
Commissioner Ford? Okay.
That's a very great list.
Commissioner Cohen?
Thank you. I watched the video of the Planning Commission, and it was very interesting. If you haven't watched it, I suggest you do. And I agree with Merritt that we do want to obviously support our ocean-dependent uses. But I'm wondering, because under our purview, I think is it 240 acres or of of city land. And I'm just wondering if there has ever been a serious exploration of, is there somewhere where maybe the waterfront could put maybe employee housing, maybe some sort of housing, explore anything? I understand also that we're in an area that's going to be impacted by sea level rise, and building new construction there sometimes is not the wisest idea. But we do have a housing crisis in our town, and I'm just wondering if anybody has looked through all of that acreage to see if there's anywhere that we could get a little bit more creative.
Just to speak to that, the answer is no. And to Commissioner McCrae's point, the interesting fact, our local coastal plan really calls out the harbor commercial zone as serving waterfront uses. And so to Merritt's point, he kind of hit the nail on the head. It is really not intended to. And so there hasn't been a push or a discussion until now. I mean, that local coastal plan was put together relatively recently and very, very heavily weighed in by the Planning Commission. And it was almost, it was in contrast to what the discussion points were now, and it really does favor usage for ocean-dependent and ocean-serving needs.
Do you know the date on that document?
2019, I believe?
Yep, 2019.
That is pretty recent, yeah. I mean, I would agree with you that if it wasn't mentioned in there, the feeling in the city has changed. And
it was almost mentioned to the opposite. So we've been following that local coastal plan, and it calls out pretty specifically that we are kind of how we are supposed to prioritize the harbor commercial zone, and it is not.
Would it be helpful to get some clarification then from whoever would be someone to modify that document, and to ask, since Planning Commission brought it up and Harbor Commission, and I know that City Council would probably support something like that too, or I assume, given their advocacy for more housing.
Yeah, it's not an agenda item in front of the Harbor Commission right now, but I don't know if the Harbor Commission broadly supports that, or if it has just been brought up by individuals.
I don't think we should advocate for, are you suggesting that we advocate for amending the local coastal plan? I mean, that plan that was approved in 2019, I think it took 8 years.
To do.
So, again, not to speak for Kate, but I'm thinking that if we did a good job with our strategic planning process and we used that local coastal plan as the overarching policy, given its emphasis on ocean-dependent uses, that we could push out housing.
No, I hear you, and I guess and I don't want to belabor the point, but I guess, you know, we are in a housing crisis. Sure. There are 240 acres under the purview, and it just, you know, maybe there's not a way. Maybe that's just the answer. But I'm just wondering if anyone has kind of gone through those 240 acres and said, you know, hey, this might be somewhere where we could do an employee housing project. I mean, that's something that the harbor could do.
Myself and Commissioner Nelson went through a very similar process for a much smaller need, and it became pretty clear over the course of a year or two that not only was there not space within the waterfront, there was very little city-owned property that would be available for boat storage, that sort of thing. And so the fact that we spent 3 years trying to find space, we are very, very space constrained. I know 200 plus acres sounds like a lot, but if you look at an aerial, we're maxed out. We're absolutely, there is almost not a square inch of space that is available, so.
Well, it sounds like what I'm asking has already happened then, so
Oh,
thank you.
the 1990, to give you an idea of what Director Wiltshire is talking about, the 1998 Harbor Master Plan basically recommended as a capital priority that space for infrastructure for the commercial fishing industry be found. That was 98. And we're still working on that today. That's why the city is supporting us and CFSB on the property at City College, because it's just not there.
I hear you. Thank you.
I have one question. I know I asked this last week, but aren't we also, isn't there another layer? We're like in an economically depressed zone as well. like, when the engine guy comes in every year, he always makes that point, right? That we're in an economically depressed zone.
I think there's various regions within the city of Santa Barbara that are considered economically disadvantaged from like the grants point of view. I don't believe that applies to kind of the harbor or the waterfront specifically, but the city, yes.
Just for engines, if you want your engine replaced. We qualify for that economically disadvantaged category.
I believe so, yes. True.
Very unusual. Yes, Commissioner Anderson.
Sorry, a little late on my button. I'm curious though, could you go a little more detail on what they were getting at with the yacht club in particular? When you think about it, it is interesting that there's a private club in kind of the best spot in the harbor. What were they discussing?
That exact kind of line, so they were curious about their lease terms. It is unique. They're our only tenant that is a ground lease, so they are only leasing the land. They own the building. So there's terms within their lease that if that lease were to terminate, they have to either turn the building over to us or demolish it and return it back to its state. So it is a unique lease in that we have nothing to do with the building. It's theirs. They put it there and it's theirs. The majority of the questions revolved around, are they paying market rent? The answer is generally yes, and so their rents have escalated pretty heavily over the last decade. We haven't done a study to what that property would pay or who would go in there if there was some sort of RFP process, but our answer to Planning Commission was yes, we generally think they're relatively close to market rent on the property.
Do they just have a base rent, or is there some sort of percentage clause? That...
It's like an escalator clause every year, up into the next 2 years. So for the last, I believe, 10 years, their rent has been escalating.
What is their rent? How much do they pay?
I don't know offhand. Yeah, I don't want to speculate.
Okay.
I can get it for you though.
Commissioner.
Thank you.
Commissioner McCray.
Yes, I just want to point out that with respect to the yacht club, I think the friction comes from the public coming down through those 90-minute spots and seeing empty parking spots in the harbor, in the yacht club parking lot. Well, everything else is full for a quarter mile all the way around. And if there was some way for that parking lot to be used jointly, I believe that everybody would be well served and there wouldn't be such push against the yacht club.
Any hands raised? Nico?
There are no hands raised, Chair Stebbin.
Harbor operations?
All right, good evening, Chair Stebbin and Harbor Commissioners, members of the public. Once again, I am Harbor Operations Manager Nathan Aldridge, and this evening I would like to present to you our Harbor Operations Report. First off is our Harbor Patrol recruitment update. After a very competitive open recruitment process for the Harbor Patrol Supervisor position, we're pleased to announce that Harbor Patrol Officer Ryan Kelly is our next Harbor Patrol Supervisor. Ryan serves as an officer with the city distinction for over 17 years. In his time with the department, received numerous awards for valor and bravery service in the field, including being named the 2011 California Boating Safety Officer of the Year. Ryan was selected from many qualified candidates, distinguished himself by his experience and his desire to serve the community and his fellow officers. He officially started last month on the 13th of June. So when you are down the round next time on the waterfront, say hello to the new Lieutenant Ryan Kelly. So next, I'd like to provide some follow-up to April's Harbor Commission meeting regarding vessel insurance. Following up on our Commission's recommendation to look into a future policy, the Waterfront created a community survey to gather some baseline information on this subject. So a link to survey is posted around the harbor on each marina gate, and then it was also sent out to all slip holders as well. They're simple, 4 basic questions. One, whether the individual had vessel insurance. If yes, what their yearly premium was. If they thought that the waterfront should require vessel insurance, and then if so, which vessels in the harbor district should be included in that. The survey was left up for about a month and a half or so and garnered about 320 responses. And a quick summary of that is sort of surprisingly, over 83% of those who responded did have vessel insurance currently. Slightly over half of them, their yearly premium was over $1,000, and 49% had a premium of under $1,000. And of those, 57% believe insurance should be required. So a majority said yes. Approximately 43% did not think it should be required. And of those, the vast majority felt that the requirements should not apply to certain groups, just either moored vessels or just commercial vessels or just recreational vessels or just vessels and slips, but they felt it should apply to all vessels in the harbor district. So there's a link to the survey responses in your packet if you'd like to look into that in a little bit more detail. And so the next steps for this process will be drafting a program proposal, which will be shared with additional stakeholders in the city. All right, and the last item of the evening is a pilot program on a vessel surrender incentive program. So this last topic is an update on our waterfront, our city's efforts to mitigate abandoned vessels that end up in public waterways or on our beaches. So as discussed in prior meetings, this past winter, the Waterfront Department has used over half of our entire 2-year state grant of $65,000 on just 2 beach boats. So combined with several prior turned-in vessels and disposals, we've already exceeded our SAVE grant. So that's a surrendered abandoned vessel program for the years of 2023 to 2025. So the waterfront remains dedicated to protecting our waterways and our beaches and is looking for additional funding sources to deal with these abandoned or turned-in vessels. It remains significantly cheaper to, and less environmentally impacting to dispose of turned-in vessels compared to boats that are washed up on the beach. And so we have been working with nonprofit Heal the Ocean to establish a financial incentive to encourage boaters to participate in voluntarily turn in their vessels. And so through this, we've established a sort of voluntary pilot program where Heal the Ocean will provide funding to help cover disposal costs for $7,500 for fiscal year 2025. So that's from July of this year through June of 2025. And the aim of this is to use a small monetary incentive, so approximately $500, for vessel owners of sort of targeted vessels to voluntarily turn in their boats. And the goal of this is to fill in sort of the gaps of our funding from the state while we address some of these vessels before they end up on the beach. And I am happy to take questions from the commission.
Commissioner Ford.
Thanks. Regarding vessel insurance, I see the last sentence about next steps, drafting an initial policy and then opening up to public outreach. Any thoughts on a little bit more information regarding that? Where are you and what are you thinking?
Yeah, thank you. So for that, taking the feedback from April's meeting with the Harbor Commission and the sort of a temperature check from this survey, my feeling of these next steps should be to come up with a tentative proposal that incorporates some provisions that take into consideration the concerns of the current insurance agency, possible some vessels, whether older or commercial vessels that are difficult or impossible to be covered under insurance, to have certain provisions for those vessels, possibly a funding or some sort of like a pool, so boats that would be able to pay an additional sum to the city that would be covered in case if there's some catastrophic issue for that vessel too. But set up some type of provision that would be an insurance proposal, and then once again to involve the public in that, to get some feedback, to narrow that down, drill down some of those specifics, and then bring it back to commission here. My sense in hearing from your voices and hearing from the public that more vessel owners than I thought, and I think we as staff thought, do currently have vessel insurance, I think, which is a good thing, number one. And then B, for those who don't, a way to bring our harbor and our marina up to sort of the industry standard and the state standard to align and also protect our city, protect our beaches and our infrastructure in a way that also has some provisions for those vessels that may not be able to get insurance. But it's nice to know that of the vessels that do and the people responded, there is a varying, sort of sliding scale in cost for the insurance. We know that the insurance industry is evolving, every year. If you look at, fire and certain areas in the state that, it's really, really tough to get insured, or people that are losing insurance live in fire-prone areas. I'm very well aware of that, and I don't want to place an undue burden or unrealistic burden on vessels or boats that are just unable to get that too. So that will definitely be a consideration. But I think taking community input and taking your input is time to come up with a proposal that we can bring back to, like I said, the stakeholders and the Harbor Commission.
Why is there such a big cost difference between recovering, washed up vessels and this $500 idea?
Yeah, Chair Sedman, thank you. It's a great question. Looking at, let's just take, for example, a 30-foot sailboat that would be a candidate for our surrendered program. So generally, an individual would approach us and they'd say, I'm at sort of the end of my ability to take care of this boat. It's either anchored somewhere or moored somewhere. I don't want it to become an issue. I want to get ahead of this. I know you have grant funding. Is this possible to work with me? And so what we would do is we make sure that they met the minimum requirements. If they have, the ownership of the vessel, they provide that. And then they would work on basically stripping that boat down of all hazardous materials, holding tank, fuel, batteries, and getting the boat cleaned. We'll get someone who scrubs the hull of the vessel too. And so a boat like that, and that's ready to go, cost involved would be a haul out and then a junk. And so from that, like I said, this is a ballpark. A 30-foot sailing vessel could be several $1,000s. Say that same boat sitting on an anchor that's been left for several months out there in the seasonal anchorage where we don't know who the owner is. It's got 2 years worth of growth on the hull. It has a full holding tank, diesel in the fuel tanks, maybe several batteries that are corroding. Breaks loose in a storm, goes on the beach, and spills a significant amount of that. So now we have to involve Marburg to mobilize their equipment, their personnel, their hours, possibly a towing group. We used Smitty's towing in the city here last time in order to winch the boat out of the surf zone in a dangerous way. So those costs add up really, really quickly. And so an example of one of those boats wasn't fiberglass. It was a steel hulled boat, about 38 feet. With that example that I told you was upwards of $17,000, $18,000. So it's an order of magnitude more expensive to deal with a boat. And then there's also the NRC notifications, the Coast Guard, that we have spills, we have creeks, we have sensitive habitats, we have wetlands, all the issues environmentally. In addition to that the cost can't just be captured in labor from a tow truck company to remove that boat too. So I would much rather request someone to meet me and work with them on the front end of that than to work with a problem on the beach.
Great answer. Thank you. Commissioner Nelson?
I'm going to try to bring both of your topics together. One, Heal the Ocean has had tremendous success in capturing significant funding from the state for all sorts of things, from capping old wells to sewage treatment solutions and all that. It would be great if you could become one of their clients or one of the line items in their budget to deal with the rising cost and the frequency of boats washing up. But secondarily, I'm looking at this line that says vast majority feel proposed requirements should apply to all vessels, and I thought you said that, so that's what we're going to do. Well, I remember when we had this discussion earlier, there was actually some thought given to, when it came to commercial fishing vessels, there was an acknowledgement that some of those might not be insurable. So when you say things like the vast majority feel that it should be across the board for everybody, does that mean you drop consideration of looking at separate classes like commercial fishing?
Yeah, Commissioner Nelson, thank you. Taking feedback is important, and maybe 99% of all of the harbor users want every boat to be, subject to the insurance requirement. At the end of the day, we may draft a policy that captures 80% of what everybody likes and wants. I think it's important to cast a net wide and really make sure that we hear as many voices as possible. But at the end of the day, as you well know, it's practically impossible to craft a policy that satisfies everybody, 100%. And once again, there's strong support from our department for the commercial fishing industry. Historically, there continues to be, and I'm well aware of the challenges and difficulties of, ferro cement hull boats, 50, 60-year-old commercial fishing vessels in getting insurance. I mentioned something, I believe, in my presentation in April with what Santa Cruz has done and some provisions with, pooling together resources and, having some ability to do that. And that will definitely be a consideration when we draft our policy.
Thanks. Excellent. Did you want to fill out a quick? We'll waive the slip. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to suggest if you're specific about liability on the insurance and not whole insurance. I know when I've been fishing out of LA and other ports for long periods, they've required insurance. So it's primary liability. So I think it should specify with the guys that they're looking at liability and not whole insurance. I think it's a different threshold for not qualifying on that.
Very well. Any other hands raised? Nico?
Oh, sorry.
There are no hands raised.
Jumping. I'm out of time today. I'm always a little late.
Yes, Commissioner Anderson.
Sorry there, guys. Is it appropriate to ask for an update on the Harbor Patrol status? I know a couple months ago we had a thorough conversation around some changes you all are facing. Does it need to be on the agenda? Is it on the agenda because it was part of the presentation, or no?
We'll provide a discussion on that in September, but yeah, we really want to veer away from talking about large topics that weren't agendized. So we'll provide an update in September, but it's moving along as we were as we discussed last.
So I'm actually ahead.
You're ahead this time.
I'm not behind.
All right. No further questions?
And just for clarification of the commission, to save an email, the yacht club's rent is just shy of $20,000 a month.
We knew you were looking that up, so. Thank you. Yes, Commissioner McCray.
Just a shout out to Ryan Kelly. Congrats, my man. I remember a day that you were tying down the dock lines for the Condor when I was running it. You've come a long way.
Yes, congratulations to him. All right, so we have an administrative action here. Item number 6, do you want to read that, please, Nico?
Item 6, election of chairperson and vice chairperson. Recommendation that Harbor Commission nominate and elect the Harbor Commission chairperson and vice chairperson for fiscal year 2025 per the city charter section 804.
Fantastic. I want to nominate Vice Chairman Adam Stanwyck to be our next chair. Do I have a second?
You have a second.
Very well. Are there other nominations? Nico?
Yes, this is a motion by Chair Stedman, seconded by Commissioner McCray, to nominate Commissioner Stanwyck as the next chair. Commissioner McCray?
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson? Commissioner Stanwyck?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Commissioner Ford?
Aye, with gratitude to Commissioner Stedman for his work.
And Chair Stedman.
Yes.
And that motion passes unanimously.
Congratulations, Adam.
Thank you.
All right. Let's do the vice chair, if there's any nominations for vice chair. The floor is open. We need to elect a vice chair.
I would put forth Commissioner Ford.
Okay, there's a nomination for Commissioner Ford. Is there a second?
Second.
Very well. Are there other nominations? Wow, this is going easy. All right, Nico?
Yes, this is a motion by Commissioner Cohen, seconded by Commissioner Nelson, to nominate Commissioner Ford as the vice chair. Commissioner Nelson?
Aye.
Commissioner Stanwyck?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Commissioner Ford?
Yes.
Commissioner McCray?
Yes.
And Chair Stedman.
Yes.
And that motion passes unanimously.
All right, congratulations, Vice Chair. You want to drive us out?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just wanted to also recognize, Chair Stedman. He's served not only one, but 2 terms now as chair. And just to highlight some of the accomplishments that I've been kind of thinking of and ruminating that he's led us over the last 2 years, but the establishment of new business and the work groups at the beginning of the commission meetings, just allow more time for discussion, I think has been very helpful. Really the agenda setting meetings and just working with the waterfront to make sure that we have everything on the agenda, everything is set and efficient, ready to go. His work with the slip assignment subcommittee, and also to his expanded of the role of the vice chair, which I know I really appreciated over the last year. So just wanted to give him another round of applause.
Thank you, Adam.
Also, too, with that, just want to say, issues going forward. I think we have a great queue of items: insurance, fishing slips, the budget, my favorite, and yeah, just also too, before we close up, just want to say that the thing that I value probably most about the commission is everybody's skills and experiences, and just really the diverse backgrounds everybody has. Because I think we all bring something very unique to the table, where it's commercial fishing or education, consulting, maritime, small business ownership. I think that all of these experiences we have really help the community. So thank you to the commission for everything. And thanks for your confidence going forward.
You're here.
Congratulations.
Here, do we want to do any?
You want to finish the agenda?
Yep, and yeah, just to wrap up, the commission and staff communications. Do you have anything?
No, nothing, just congrats, Chair Stanwyck and Vice Chair Ford.
Thank you. Any other commission communications? All right. Looks like we are at the end of the agenda. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Great. All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposing? Any abstention? All right, motion passes. Adjourned.